Welcome to Keep It Moving Wheelchair Maintenance and Repair. In this video, we're going to be covering the informational where, what, and how you need to get started on your journey to maintaining and repairing your wheelchair and mobility device. We'll be covering how to find and quickly navigate the owner's, tech, and parts manuals whenever those last two are available, and what to do if you can't find those, because you can still get that information. We're going to figure out what starter tools we need, plus any additional higher level tools you can use for slightly advanced repairs, and then show you where to get those things, concentrating on what you need and nothing else. Because here at Keep It Moving, our goal is to make accessibility accessible. Okay, a good first step is actually to go ahead and find the owner's manual and possibly any other manual you can for your device. So we'll do this with a couple of different websites because they have slight variances. The first one we'll go to is the ProMobile one, and I'll just come down here, look for manual wheelchair, and I'll look up my nephew's wheelchair, which is a Tie-Lite Aero Z. And so if I come down and find it, I'll click right here. Now for a lot of the wheelchair companies or sellers, they'll actually put the brochures or the manuals at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the N key on my keyboard just to jump down to the bottom real quick. I'll see if there's any other ones here. And right there's the manual. So I would just go ahead and download that. Now for the quickie one, you come up to manual or power wheelchairs, and you go ahead and click there, and you have Quickie, Zippy, and RGK, which is their made to measure chair. And then just go to rigid or whatever you're looking for, and then scroll down. And one of the chairs I've been working on lately was a Nitrum. So I'll click on that. And same thing, the manuals are at the bottom. So I'll hit end and just go up a little bit. And the nice thing about the Quickie chairs is they do actually have the owner's manual, but they also have the parts manual too. And we'll discuss that in a minute. So that's the Quickie. I'll hit home. Now here with Invacare, I had gone to their site many years ago, actually for an old chair at that time, which was a Crossfire T6A. I was able to find the guides again recently by just Googling it, and was able to find the parts guide and the owner's manual. But right now they don't have a ton of chairs on here. If you go to manual, it's primarily, there we go. It's primarily these type of chairs. So custom manual push, and then standard wheelchairs. But if you click on that, they just have a documents tab here. So the owner's manual's right there. And for key mobility, it's right up here. And then you go to the chairs and then just pick the type of chair. Now in this case, we're clicking on the Little Wave Click, a pediatric chair. And it'd be right here. Now they keep their manuals pretty close, so they actually have a tech manual and user instructions. Tech manual has a little bit of information for actual techs, and then the user instructions is basically a warning guide, like a safety guide and everything for the chair. How to use it, how to adjust seats, but what not to do, things like that. So you could download those. So I'll go ahead and go through a few things on these manuals and how I prefer to actually navigate them. One, I do have a tablet. So I have a tablet with a PDF reader that supports search and bookmark functions. Adobe Acrobat Reader free does not have the ability to assign bookmarks. That's in the paid version. You can use the find function, but this right here that I'm in is actually called Sumatra PDF. If you have a PC, rather than a Mac, it's super lean, doesn't use a lot of resources, constantly being updated, supports tabs, so there's tabs across the top, supports a find, and you can even change the background to dark. It's got light, medium, and dark. I do have it on the dark right now. It helps with my eyes. Plus, it's better when you're actually, recording something. You don't get a bunch of light changing constantly. Now, right here, I do have the Aero Z. When my nephew announced that that was the chair he was getting a couple years ago, as finally getting a new chair after 14 years, I went ahead and downloaded this. And I noticed that there were some tweaks. So once he finally got the chair, this is the manual that was available for ProMobile from right here. And One thing that happened is the first night he drove his chair, or the first night he rode in his chair, he went roughly a mile to Walmart and back. On the way back, his front caster fork folded backwards, and it caused him to fall out of his chair and face plant in the middle of an intersection. Luckily, there were no cars there, but I was trying to think what was going on. He thought he broke the chair, so I rushed roughly a 5-hour drive each way, went there immediately, and what we noticed is that it was his caster fork. So I'm going to pull something up here, and his caster fork, the actual section here that you adjust, you loosen it, move your fork, make sure it's angled properly, that didn't have the two that the older book had, because this one had 2 screws. The middle screw, the instructions tell you to tighten it fairly tight, securely tight, and then the external one, tighten it to 7 Newton meters. So the new guide, which matched his, that actually, when you went down, that only had 1 center screw, which is what his had, and it says that needed to be tightened to, I believe it was 25 Newton meters, right there. 25 Newton meters with a 6mm socket bit and a torque wrench. So what I'm guessing is, and I'm not positive, but what I'm guessing is maybe somebody was comfortable with the older style with the 2 screws versus the 1 screw, and they somehow didn't read that it was right on there. And I'll actually put a picture of the real chair on the screen now, that it does say torque up to 25 Newton meters, and it just wasn't tight enough. And that actually caused a pretty serious injury. So whenever you do get your owner's manual, a thing that I'm recommending is that you do go through it and look for different types of tools that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and in this guide, I'll type tool. And one thing about the ProMobile guides that I noticed on the Tie-Lite chairs is they don't really get into all the tools right off the bat. They tell you the tools based on what you're trying to do. So essentially here on the Tie-Lite non-specialty tools, which I'll get into like bearing presses in a moment, it tended to be metric bits, rubber mallet, a ruler, a framing square, something that can give you a perfectly right angle to set your fork. Let me see, Phillips screwdriver, bit holder, some Allen keys, regular ones, and that's pretty much it. And then the torque wrench, that's a biggie. So I'm going to go back up to tool, and I'm going to change that to torque. I'm using the search function that's built into Sumatra PDF, and you can see right here it does say torque wrench, drafting triangle, that's what they call that one thing, 6mm socket bit, and that's for the casters. So as you go through this, it tells us, okay, we need to have 25 Newton meters there. This one also has torque, and that's for the camber tube and then the camber axle sleeve, and it's 25mm open end wrench, that's for this piece here, and 19mm open end torque wrench. So you'd have to have a torque wrench with this that has an open end, and you'd be setting that to 26 Newton meters. Now the nice thing is if you do get a torque wrench, let me see if I can grab it right here. This is a torque wrench that I actually use. I had it in a different color that's no longer available. I like this one because actually it's got dual range on it, so it does show you exactly what you need there. And it's black with gold writing. Mine was chrome, so it's a lot harder to read. So if you grab something like this, and then these crow's feet, the crow's feet does have a 19mm, and if you put that together, you can actually use that. In fact, hang on, I actually have an article by Tecton, and if you combine it with the crow's foot, you can actually go ahead and still use it competently. In fact, this is an article by Tecton. If you want, there's a fascinating video on YouTube by the Torque Test channel, and they did test this. As long as you set that torque, the torque adapter, whatever you wind up using, right angle, if you set it at a right angle to the socket there, the socket insert, as long as it's not up, it's at a 90-degree angle, the torque isn't affected. So you could actually set that torque wrench to the torque that you need, and then use that crow's foot wrench to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish with adjusting your camber tube on this particular chair. So you could actually do that. So torque wrenches, they come in many different styles, but the ones you'll primarily use on here is more of a bicycle style. That is 2 to 20. I'll put a picture on the screen of the one that I use, and there will be a link in the video if you'd like. And that one is anything that's up to 20. Then the larger ones, that's what you're using primarily for camber tubes, different parts of the axle. Some of the back rests will require that. Anything 20 newton meters or higher, that would be something that you need there. I believe that's 14.7 foot-pounds or 177 inch-pounds, because some of these guides, they'll actually bounce between it. There are some great conversion tables, you know, on the internet, or even conversion calculators to use, but this is one of the things here. Now, I'll also look up something. I'll look up fork. Some of these guides will actually have a clickable table of contents, some won't, but I'm going to go ahead and click here to this fork. And as you can see, this is the style of fork that I'll actually be working on 2 videos from now. And this video, or pardon me, and this page, this actually shows you the breakdown of the fork, and you can see a bearing there. So you can tell that these forks actually require bearings. And we'll actually have a video coming up on that, but I'm going to show you how to get those bearings and figure out what size bearings they are too. So that's on the tie light. Just some of the things you can do there. Another reason that I do like this PDF reader is it does quickly support bookmarks. So you can use the shortcut for bookmark, which is Control B. And then I could put arrow Z and fork. And now it's saved over there on the left-hand side. And these are all the shortcuts that are the bookmarks that I put across all these guides that I have in here. So now I'll go to the Key Mobility Little Wave, and this is the owner's manual. And with the owner's manual, if you come down it, it's primarily a what to do and what not to do guide. So it doesn't give you a lot of information on what you can work on, tools you can get. It does tell you what some of the parts are. It does show you how to adjust things, but not a lot beyond that. Now right here it tells you you can adjust the footrest. Now I definitely get that 2 to 20 newton meter torque wrench that has the bits with it, because many times they'll warn you that if you do tighten this, make sure this is 40 inch-pounds, and then you could just adjust that to newton meters and not to exceed that, because that could actually crunch the tubing, and then you'd have problems taking it in and out or making any other fine adjustments. So whenever there is torque, make sure you actually do that. In fact, one of the most common problems with brakes is people don't torque them down all the way, and then they're a little loose and they start working their way back and forth, or they could catastrophically fail if you had a bunch of weight on them and you were trying to keep your chair in one place. So generally those will tell you to tighten those down to 7 newton meters. And if you don't have a torque wrench, you know, it is very hard to figure that out by feel. Park Tools does have some videos on YouTube about what perceived effort is. I don't even mess with that. A $20 to $35 torque wrench works for me. So this is the Click owner's manual. Now right here is the Click technical manual. So I'm going to go to Key Mobility, because that was right here. And when you get into this, there's a little bit more information. So frame to size guide. I love this because sometimes you'll forget what the frame size is, and if you do have to replace your brakes or you're ordering side guards, for example, you need to make sure it fits the tube. So the tube here is 1.18, and then there's the camber tube. It's actually the same size. Tells you the spoke tension values, because a little spoke wrench comes in mighty handy. Don't go crazy with that, but if one's loose, you know, tighten it up. Seat width, a lot of the different things. Then you have some exploded views. So this is how the caster mount is. Some chairs, instead of having the bearings in the fork, which is this style, they'll actually have 2 bearings in whatever the caster fork attaches to. So you can actually adjust that. It goes into the stems, and whenever you see something like this with an empty top and a cap, that generally means that there's bearings in there. The bearings can load from the top and the bottom, or just the top. And we'll go through that actually in that video that we have coming up, but I will show you a couple pictures here too. So you can look at many of the different pieces here. Now in this one, I'm going to go ahead and go torque again, and they have a tool page here. So it tells you basically you need 2.5 to 6 millimeter Allen wrenches. So I'd get the L-shaped Allen wrenches and the Allen bits. I'm going to recommend the Tecton ones. I've been using them forever. They're great. There will be a link in the video. Those come in super handy. Just get an extension, a ratcheting screwdriver. That makes your life a lot easier. 2 10 millimeter wrenches and 2 8 millimeter. And then the rest are all singles. So if you got a combo wrench set of metric and then a couple extra wrenches at your local store, that'd be handy. Phillips screwdriver, utility blade, and of course that torque wrench. Now if we hit torque again, we can find all the pages that torque's listed at, which it looks like it's not really listed there a lot. So instead of checking torque, I'm going to check pounds. There's the weight, so I'll hit that again. There's 40 inch-pounds, so that was that footrest. I'll go ahead and click that again. There's pounds, and I noticed that they use newton meters, but they used the different one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and it tells you right here that if you're setting the alignment for your caster fork, this is how you use that triangle, that when you're setting it, you need to set that to 9.04 newton meters or 80 inch-pounds. So you can set that to whatever it's there. Then the second screw to 50 inch-pounds or 5.65 newton meters, so just a hair under 6 newton meters. And then another screw. So you definitely want to make sure you have that torque wrench because you're actually doing 3 screws, it looks like on here. 1, 2, and 3. So if you don't find it with pounds or torque, you can do NM, except with this one it's N*M. And then that tells me that they found it again on page 60, which is actually this page. So right here, setting the toe to 0. So you have a couple of places. So you want to make sure you have a torque wrench if you're working on the Key Mobility Little Wave Click. Now this is actually an exploded view of the fork for the Little Wave, and I'll show you where I got that. That clearly shows what's underneath the cap, because I noticed more and more wheelchairs as people started saying, hey, you don't fix my chair quick enough, I need to find somebody else to do it. They've been cutting back on certain types of information they have on their site. So you can find that on the parts sites instead, which I'll take you to in a moment, or through third-party vendors that actually help you get the parts yourself. So right here it does show the stem, the cap, the 2 bearings. It's showing it coming in from the top, so that means there's a much smaller hole underneath it. That pretty much just shows that inner race. And then right here's a snap ring. So if you see a snap ring on your fork, then that means that you need snap ring pliers. I'm going to put a link in there of an affordable set I got. I think they were $8. I did have to tap the ends to be flush or parallel with a little bitty hammer, but they were very affordable. I also got some really nice ones from Harbor Freight, the Icon. That was like a set of 8 for $75, but the ones I got for $8 work great. You want 45-degree angled ones because that allows you to get into that caster fork and pull that snap ring out. And those would be internal snap ring pliers too, 45-degree angle. And then that lets you get that out, and then there's the little washer, and then the other bearing. And I do have a video coming up. It's going to be 2 videos from now. The next video will be a demo of the actual tools. So make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss that video. And then the video after that will be replacing the caster fork bearings for both the type that comes in from the top only and the top and the bottom, because they're slightly different. Now right here, this is for that Quickie Nitrum. And with this one, I did find that this one's owner's manual did have a lot of good information here. So I'll click right here. On this one, page 15 actually did have maintenance. So if you did want to search maintenance, many of them have maintenance intervals, or here's a checklist that you should be checking. So this one had a really nice one, and it says annually that should be serviced by an authorized dealer. So you can go through that. And then it had some pretty good information, but a lot of it was hidden. So I'm going to go ahead and do torque on this one. And some torque came up. It says the freestyle style back. It says do not do unless you tighten it to the actual torque specified. So in other words, don't mess with it unless you know the torque. Right here, critical maintenance tips. Basically on this one, it actually said if you don't have a stated torque for any fastener, set that to 6.78 Newton meters, so 60 inch-pounds. It was really nice because it does have all the tools that you need listed here on page 21. So this one has a mix of fasteners, so be careful there because it's Imperial, SAE, metric for the hex sets. Same thing with the wrenches. And then the torque wrench, you need one of those. And then a hex bit for a socket for the torque, because you need that. You don't use the bits, you actually use socket bits. Phillips and flat screwdrivers, and the entire pressure gauge here. But it is nice that they do tell you what type of wrench to use when you are working on your quick release axle. I believe this is 11 and that's 19 on there, at least on one of these that I saw. So you can click again, go through a few of these, and just look for whatever type of torque wrench you need. If you got the 2 to 20 Newton meters one, and then also the larger one, you're set to do anything that you need to do on your chair. If you get the 2 to 20, you're pretty much set for most things. If your chair does have a fastener though for adjusting the axle, for adjusting the caster fork, like the one that I showed you earlier with the Aero Z, then you do have to also have the big one, or at least a torque adapter. They do sell those as well. So this one right here is the larger one. And then I do have, or pardon me, yeah, that's the larger one. And then I do have this one. And actually, that's the brand that's not there anymore. Here's the replacement for it. Same case. And so this is the 2 to 20 Newton meter one, which will handle most things. And then it's also comes with the bits, so that's pretty handy. Now these are 1/4 inch bits. So if you do grab one of the larger ones, you would need to grab matching hex bits if you do need that. Most of the things you have to do with the larger torque wrenches are sockets or those crowfoot wrenches, open-ended wrenches. So you probably won't need bits for those, but you can get them. And I do have all the links. I'll have them in the video. And I do have all these listed on the website if you want to see the tools that I've been using for years. Now right here, that was for the Nitrum. Now the Nitrum also had the complete parts guide. And I love this because this does actually show everything you need. It also shows you that if you need to adjust the angle of your forks, that there's actually some special tools there. And I'll show you where those kits are and where you can find them. Not through me, through an independent third party. But I do like that fact that they do list the bearings here. So on this one, this was a quickie chair. And number 10 is a 28 millimeter outer diameter, 12 millimeter inner diameter. That's the challenge with quickie chairs, is that they actually have a different size, larger bearing for their caster fork than they do for their rear wheels. So they use an R8 bearing on the rear rims, and then a 12 by 28 6001 bearing on the caster forks. So when you get yourself some tools for that, you will need to keep that in mind on a quickie chair or any of the other ones under the quickie and zippy banner. And I'll show you how to find that information. But really nice parts manual, very handy. Now for this one, this is a supplemental guide that was actually available when you see the parts. So if you do need to adjust the caster fork, then this is the instructions on using that specialized caster wrench and then that flat wrench there. Now if you are looking for that, you can actually find that from Southwest Medical. In fact, a lot of the different websites that do offer their brochures, when you got to the parts section or in the brochure, it'll actually say if you're looking for parts or part breakdowns, go to Southwest Medical and have the link there. So if you are looking for parts, you can come directly down here and click on replacement parts and then pick your chair. So for example, I'm going to do the key mobility and I'll use the little wave click. So I'll click on model, little wave click, and then it has basically a hyperlinked, tree here for the PDF part manual, but also with links to those parts or those kits. So if you come to caster mount, you can see right here, here's the caster mount, and it shows you the different parts. So if you are looking for a type of fastener, maybe you stripped yours on accident, or something happened to it, the head stripped out, you can actually get a replacement there. Right here, here's the casters themselves and the caster forks. So I'm going to click on single-sided fork, and it shows you right there how it's broken down. Here's the caster fork and stem. Right there you can see that there is a snap ring, so you would need that 45-degree angle snap ring, internal snap ring pliers to be able to do this. Number 12 shows you the nut there. Now what I've noticed is that's an M10, so it shows that. The shaft could be larger than the M10 on the top part, but then the actual part that screws into this nut would be the M10. So if you ever need a nylon nut, it's just an M10 one, but it won't be black, chances are. You could probably get that. But I noticed that number 11, which was the actual bearing, they don't actually put that here. So they don't tell you what size bearing that is. So you could come up here to this and then search bearings, and then I'll just put key mobility there. That doesn't really help, but you could go ahead and just do bearings and then sort through this, but there is a better way, because you can find the bearings and it will finally say it here. For some reason it doesn't work with the sort, and I couldn't find a better filtering system. But what you can do is actually go to wheelchairbearings.com. They're one of the places that I get some of my tools from, and I do not have a deal with them. But they have a really awesome thing for key mobility and for quickie. They actually have wheelchair bearing finders. So for the key mobility, we were on the little wave click. So it says, here's the different types of chairs they make. So you scroll down, here's the front caster bearings, so the wheels on the front. And if you look, they're 608, two sealed, double-sided sealed, 608, which is the 8mm bearing. So they do sell the bearings there. Now, Wheelchair Bearings uses ABEC 5 bearings, which is higher than most manufacturers use. They use between 1 and 3. When I need a bunch of bearings, I do order bearings from Amazon. Those are ABEC 3 bearings. I'll have a link there. If you need them quick, though, they will get them to you fast through here. And they come with anti-seize grease, cleaning Q-tip, especially Q-tip, and an acetone wipe. It's a pack of 4. But they also have the different little toolkits here. And the mini toolkit would have bearing, a bearing press and a bearing extractor. Now, in the video that I'll attach into this video and put it in the description, I went through how to use the bearing extractor to replace a caster wheel bearing, but also how to use pin punches to do the same thing. You can get a set of 5 pin punches, and the second one is perfect for knocking those out. But for the bearings, 608. When you go down though, now they talk about wheelchair fork bearings, and they give you the models that have that. So the little wave click does actually use a fork with R8 bearings. Those are 1/2-inch bearings by 1 1/8 external by 0.3125 for thickness. So it does warn you that you do need a snap ring plier. I've actually bought this one. It's okay. It's actually a little worse than the 45 degree for $8 I got on Amazon. I also had to knock the tips because that's one of the ones with the cheaper ones. These don't really line up very well, so sometimes you have to knock it with a hammer. Go ahead and get the $8 one or some really nice ones. You don't need super nice ones because that's a fairly small snap ring. Do not get the $5 one. I'll put it on the screen from Harbor Freight that allows you to convert between. Those do not pinch hard enough. They slip all the time. That's a waste. Plus they only come in 90 and straight, where 45 degrees is what actually gets in there really handy. All Right, so that's for the fork bearings, R8 on this key mobility chair. And then when you scroll down, some of them, they're wheelchair caster mount bearings. That's in the actual where the caster fork attaches, because some of the caster forks, and I'll put one on the screen, they're solid metal with a pole, with a stem, but they don't have the bearings. The mount does. So if that's the case, the key mobility tsunami and catalyst right here, that will actually show you a link of it. So if you click on it, it shows you right there. That's what this looks like. And then it tells you what the bearings are. And for this, for the tsunami and the catalyst standard, they use a 6001, 12 millimeter inner race, 28 millimeter outer diameter. So that one is different than the R8, which is that 1/2 inch. So you'd have to look here. That'll cause you to decide some things when it comes to buying presses and extractors. You can get bearings out of rear rims very easy. I'm going to have a video coming up on that with sockets, pin punches very safely. I wouldn't use a screwdriver like some people demonstrate. Wait for the vid. But the extractor is really important for forks. Now for the fork, this piece here, you could actually get this out with pin punches and a socket to knock it out nice and even, because you have a tube that's nice and open. You do not have that with the fork, so it's much better to go ahead and get an extractor when you're using a fork, especially for a 28. Now this is for the key mobility. It starts to get into the rear wheels, and usually the rear wheels will be an R8 because it's a 1/2 inch inner diameter, and that's what a quick axle tends to be. So you can actually get those pieces there, and it'd be very consistent. So if you're in a key mobility chair that doesn't have one of the special caster fork mounts, not the caster fork, then you could just get 608 bearings for the front wheels, the front caster wheels, and then 8 total bearings for the 2 rear rims and for the front forks. But if they do have caster fork mounts like this, then you will need to get 6001 bearings as well. This is Editing Brent, and I realized that I hadn't covered one of the most common ways you can tell what type of bearings you need. Many bearings will actually have the model of the bearing on the bearing itself, usually on the rubber seal or stamped on the metal if it's not rubber sealed. So if you can get to the bearing, be it a caster, caster fork, caster mount, or rear wheel, if you can look at the bearing, chances are you can figure out which type you need to order and the tools that go with it. Now the other one that's kind of a little odd, very similar to what we just went through with the key mobility with the caster fork mounts, that's actually the Quickie and the Zippy chairs. So their front casters do use the smaller 8mm 608 bearings, very similar to skateboard bearings. You can get presses and extractors, they're about this big in one, but with the little hand press that I put in that previous video, and I'll go into more detail in a future video, that is cheaper and it's much smaller than one of those things. Very, very easy to replace caster bearings. But right here you have the Zippy wheelchair fork bearing. You'll notice that's a 6001 bearing. And what's odd is the fork, these forks do have the 6001, but then their caster mount versions for the chairs that have it in the caster mount, similar to this one, those are actually an R8. So if you have these chairs, chances are these bearings and all the tools you need to change them will be the same. But if you have these chairs right here, you would go ahead and need the 6001. So what's that mean? Let me go ahead and show you. Now I started to mention something on the website for where you get the press and the bearing extractors, but I figured I'd go ahead and show it live. So if you have one of those chairs that I mentioned that have different rear wheels, versus the front fork caster bearing. Quickie comes to mind if it's the fork, not the fork mount, like this. If it's not the fork mount, it's the fork itself that has the different bearing. It's very hard to get these bearings out because they usually have a very tiny space in between, so it's hard to get a pin punch or anything in there, even a screwdriver, to knock them out. Plus I don't like using screwdrivers because you could damage a lip. So you need these blind bearing removers. You want to order the set that actually matches your caster fork bearing. So for example, if you have 1/2-inch quick axles for rear rims, your bearings would be R8, like this caster fork from Thailand. But if your front fork used a 6001, this would fit just fine in the bearing to remove it from your rear wheel, but when you went to use it on your caster fork, it'd be too big, because 1/2-inch is 12.7 millimeters, whereas the 6001 has a 12 millimeter in a race. So this one would fit perfect. Now you can use these 6001s from the press to press in. They're actually the same outer diameter and press surface. It's just their inner sleeve here that centers it is just a little smaller. So you have a tiny bit of play, 0.7 millimeters on a 1/2-inch bearing, an R8. So this would work on the 1/2-inch. There's other ways you can press your bearings or knock your bearings out of rear rims. I'll show you that later on. However, if you get the 1/2-inch, that'd fit your rear bearings perfect. But if your fork was the 6001, not only would your bearing extractor not fit, but your press wouldn't fit neither. It won't go in. It's 0.7 millimeters too big. If you got this kit and you tried to use it on a 1/2-inch bearing fork, it would be too loose. So you need to make sure that the extractor matches your bearing. Now if you wanted to go with this kit, which was $36, the bike kit, that has the 8 millimeter presses, 6001 presses, and the R6. Great kit, but you would need to make sure that you at least purchased your right size extractor to get these bearings out. If you have some other ideas on how to get bearings out with a tiny little ridge in there, I'd love to hear it. But yes, so make sure that this actually matches, because you want to make sure that it can fit in there just fine to be able to tighten it down and knock these bearings out. Presses are important as well. So hopefully that helped explain it a little bit more. I'll have some links to some suggested toolkits in the description of the video. Keep it moving. We're here to make accessibility accessible. Thank you very much for watching, and subscribe to Keep It Moving Wheelchair Maintenance and Repairs for more videos like these.